You can divide meditation into meditations that focus outside of yourself and meditations that focus inside of yourself. Generally, all meditations known to Buddhism are to do with some internal focus. The ones outside of yourself, they exist, but I don't recommend them because you can get yourself into some serious problems with them. They are quite closely related to things like hypnosis, and often they require someone to get you out of your meditation trance. It may be something you can't do for yourself. Yeah. So, yes, when we talk about 40 different methods of meditation, actually it's referring all to internal focus in meditation. Yeah, 40 different ways of focusing inside yourself in order to bring the mind to some sense of inner peace. But whatever of these 40 methods you're talking about, when you're talking about how the mind responds to the meditation practice, even though the objects may be different or the process may be different, but the actual pathway which the mind follows and which shows some degree of progress is actually the same for all those different methods. Interesting? And according to the scriptures, you can describe the way the mind progresses, either in terms of the images which are seen by the mind or in terms of the quality of the consciousness. Yeah. So we look at images of the quality of the image first of all. For people starting out with a method of meditation which involves some sort of image, so let's say if it's meditation on the breath, you may see nothing. So this would not be a good way to measure your progress. But with meditation on some sort of visual image, then you could use this as some guidance, so you have some idea about what sort of progress you're making. So when you're new to meditation, you start with something known as a preparatory image. If you can think back to when you first started your meditation, maybe the teaching monk asked you to think of a crystal ball, so you tried really hard to see a crystal ball, and the result of all your efforts is that maybe you can see a very vague and fuzzy outline of something not completely unlike a crystal ball inside yourself. Yeah? Maybe not a very convincing achievement, but it's something. And it tells you something about just how much concentration your mind has. The fact that the mind can see anything at all means that you have some sort of degree of concentration. Yeah? Known as a preparatory image. The word image, in the technical word for it, would be nimit. Nimit. Yeah, nimitta. But as time goes on with your meditation, you may notice that from the fuzzy, vague image that you started with, the image starts to change on its own into something which is a little bit clearer. In this case, it would be known as an acquired image. So, a bit like an acquired taste, it takes a little bit of achieving. And generally the sort of quality of that would be better defined. Certainly it may be accompanied by a feeling as well as a picture. So it's almost that you can feel it's there instead of it just being like some sort of hallucination. And as time goes on, that will become an image over which you actually have more control. What's known as a counter image. And in the scriptures it's said that counter image has the quality that you are able to control it well enough to be able to expand it or contract it at will. So you would be able to do loving kindness meditation with that image. If you don't use a method of meditation and use an image, then you're talking about the feeling or what you notice about the state of awareness of that meditation. Again, you start with preparatory, a sense of calm maybe. At least you're pretty sure your mind is staying on one thing rather than jumping around onto many different things. As time goes on, then it works up to what's known as neighbourhood concentration, so which doesn't mean that your mind's around the neighbourhood somewhere, but it means like it's in the neighbourhood of like what you're aiming for. So neighbourhood concentration. Beyond that, the interesting thing they add in is that somehow along the way you overcome the 5 hindrances. And if you don't know what the 5 hindrances are, I will talk about them tomorrow, because you ought to know about them. But it's generally all the things that you're up against in your meditation somehow fall away, leaving you with your untainted, proper quality concentration. And beyond that, you reach what's known as the first absorption. So, if you overcome the 5 hindrances, then the result of that will be entering upon the first absorption. So, you all know what absorption is? Yes? Ryan, can you enlighten us?
It's, I think in the scriptures or the commentaries also refer to attainment concentration. Past access concentration is characterized by 5 qualities. One of them is bliss, another one is rapture or happiness, and there's a couple other qualities. But
Yeah, well, that's pretty good. But probably just a very basic idea is there's a state of mind where literally your concentration becomes absorbed onto what you are focusing on. It's some of the translations from Pali to English are pretty bad, but this is quite a good one, I think, because it's what actually happens to your mind. It becomes just sort of sucked onto that image, usually in quite a gentle way. Sometimes to the point that you actually feel that you are that image or state. Yeah, because it can be a state. Sometimes you read in these sort of Taoist scriptures about non-duality, where there's no longer the subject and the object anymore, they become one thing. And this is rather like that, because it really is an absorption of one thing into the other, so you become absorbed by the thing you're observing. Sometimes in the technical language they're known as jhana. You're probably more familiar with other languages. Chan is what it would be called in China, and Zen would be what it's called in Japanese. So they're all talking about supposedly the same thing. First absorption means that there's probably more of them, and generally there's about 4 levels of absorptions, each with decreasing numbers of the factors that Ryan was talking about. But yes, you can see that whether you describe it in terms of an image or whether you describe it in terms of the state of meditation, they seem to be talking about the same sort of route. Yeah? Route for the mind. So, if they're all on the same route, why bother having so many methods of meditation? Doesn't it seem a little bit excessive? And in the old days, and this is going back to what's known as the manual called the Path of Purity. Oh, it's higher absorptions. Yeah, you know that. Is that different meditators bring different dispositions to the practice. Rather similar to psychological types, but if you look deeply, you find that, in fact, they are a little bit less used than that. According to the Visuddhimagga, or the Path of Purity, there are 6 different possible dispositions which meditators bring to their practice. So you might like to think about which one you might be. Unfortunately, I don't have a handy psychological test to tell you that. First one, those who are disposed towards sense desire. Yeah, maybe they look like that. So, people who love things of beauty. And we will move to the next one. Those who have a disposition towards either anger or hatred. Yeah, who are annoyed by small things like mice sticking their tongue out. And then there are those who have a disposition towards ignorance. So, the easily confused of the world. You probably will notice they seem to be dealing with a rather different set of issues than the psychological type, yeah? Generally, none of those would be considered a good thing. If you look carefully, though, you find that they have their opposites. But the opposites don't really match up very well from what I can tell. First is faithfulness. Apparently it's the opposite of sense desire. I guess you could think about it as being someone being attracted by something of, an object of faith of great beauty, and therefore their desire for something thereby becomes something useful. Yeah, but the faithful people of the world, they have them in all cultures. Basically people who don't need too many reasons for what they love in terms of a spiritual path. Yeah, they just sort of go for it and they believe. Some might say gullible. The opposite apparently of anger and hatred is Buddhahood. Yeah. Apparently the logic behind this one is that the Buddha, if you study his life history, especially when he was taken outside the palace as a young man, and he saw the four sights, the old person, the ill person, and the dead person, yeah? And then finally seeing the holy man, and simply seeing those sights and having explained to him that yes, he would end up like that someday too, even though he was a king and a prince, immediately it sort of clicked in his head that well, this is definitely the reason why he should want to become a holy man. He didn't need to think too long and hard about that. So the ability of the Buddha to sort of really get the point very quickly about things is supposed to be a Buddhahood disposition. How it's opposite to anger and hatred, I'm not quite sure, but that's the connection they make in the scriptures. Last one is rational analysis. This is very much like the T's in our psychological type, those who like to sit and work things through in a logical way, sequential way. So people need lots of reasons for things they do. So what I'm going to do is abbreviate these, and I'm sorry for the abbreviations, they are abbreviated from the Pali. R, Raga, Jarit, R. T for Dosa, Jarit, for anger. M for Moha, Jarit, for ignorance. S for Sattha, Jarit, for faithfulness. B, it's a little bit more helpful, Buddhi Jarit. And V for, it's a Vitakka Jarit, the thoughtful, logical people. We'll see why I needed to abbreviate them in just a second, because what I'm going to do now is go through each of the 40 methods of meditation, and we'll look at two things. firstly, as a beginner, will it get you all the way to a higher level of the absorptions? So that's sort of potential for progression. And secondly, which types of dispositions are these meditations useful for? And in the olden days, the job of the meditation teacher was to look at people, look at Ryan, look, oh, he looks like a terribly angry person, so let's look up the sort of what we have for dosage or it, and we'll give him one of those like spread loving kindness meditations or something. Yeah? So here we go. We start with the first set, which is called the kasinas, which means visual objects of meditation. So we have meditation on the earth, kasina. And these first four are all those old elements: earth, water, fire, and air. If you can't remember them easily, then think back to the disco groups of the 80s, and you will remember at least three of them. Okay, going beyond that, we have colors. Blue, yellow, red, and white. If you're interested in what you actually did with these meditations, well, you sometimes would use that material to draw up a circle of some sort. Or if you were in a certain landscape, let's say from your place of residence, you could see a pond, a water pond, which is round, so it has a shimmering blue effect to it. You could then adopt that as your water kasina. See it as close as you could until you remember it, and then think of it inside yourself. Yeah? Fire, I don't know, maybe you go and light a candle somewhere, look at it until you can remember it, and then transfer that to the inside. Two similar ones, meditation on a light kasina, which I would say is really the meditation that we do here. Meditation on light kasina, so any sort of imagination of brightness of some sort. Meditation on a space kasina, which is just imagining empty space. Rather similar perhaps to the observation practice that we do. So let's look at the potential and the people they're suitable for. Put up the little scale, and we come back to our abbreviations. Look, V's, which means that they are good for people who think a lot, the rational analysis people. Takes you all the way from preparatory right up to the higher absorption, so pretty good going if you're a thinker. Same again, same again, same again for all the the element kasinas. Moving to the colors, we see it has a different clientele. This time the angry people, those sacharit. But you notice that it starts at preparatory and takes you all the way there to the higher absorptions. And the same goes for those other three colors. Now, we come to the final two, and we get A's for both of them. What's A's? It's a trick question. It means all of them. Not a Pali abbreviation. So, these are two meditation techniques that are actually quite handy, because they are not only applicable to pretty much anybody, but they also take you all the way there too. So although other ones you may need to be careful about who you're recommending them to, or you may need to swap around between practices halfway through the progression, these two are safe bets. And what is quite lucky is that we are practicing those too. So they are good stand-up meditation practices. Within the 40, there's the only two that's applicable to. Yes, Ryan.
Did you explain how we practice both at the same time? One's a space
No, we don't practice both, but within Dhammakaya, I think we practice elements of both of those. So let's say you were doing a space practice. This would be where you don't conjure up a picture, but you see what's there. Or possibly use a feeling. A sort of liberal interpretation. Next come the nasty ones. And you may not be disappointed that we are not practicing them this time round. They are called the 10 Asupa practices, which means we take you to go and meditate in a graveyard. I think they have a graveyard here on site. Oh, is it a question? Yeah, it would be the light kasina. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Now let's look at this. If you focus on the red scale at the top, you see that you start off by getting some degree of concentration. You work up to what is known as absorptions. Then there's absorptions and beyond. Now, in theory, the ability to get some special knowledge would only start happening the moment you get to some sort of absorptions. In Buddhism, there is a distinction made between two sorts or two stages of meditation. The more basic one is sometimes known as samatha practices, and the more advanced or interesting aspect of meditation would be known as vipassana. Most methods of meditation that are complete would incorporate both stages or aspects of the meditation, simply because your mind needs to be calm first before it's settled enough to penetrate any new knowledge. Now, it's like you have some telescope. If you can't hold the telescope still, then how are you going to get a clear image to actually use the telescope to see anything clearly? Yeah? Now, I would say, and I think within Dhammakaya, they would say that Dhammakaya is a samatha vipassana technique, which means that it incorporates both aspects, and the two aspects actually occur hand in hand. So the calmer your mind becomes, the more of this special knowledge which you can access. Generally, you start to have access to it after the first absorption. And all 40 of these methods would be known as samatha practices, samatha kamatan. Yeah? But once you get to the first absorption, actually the difference between the different techniques disappears. You're on the same pathway, whatever you practice to get there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you get more value for money. You get more value for money because you get to vipassana in 3 days. But actually, I think they use the term vipassana erroneously, because there's a sort of assumption amongst those practitioners that vipassana is superior to samatha, and therefore samatha is dispensable. So we sort of skip, cut to the chase and go for vipassana, they say. And if you read the scriptures carefully, they say, For those who cannot manage to focus their mind, never mind, we'll do this instead, which is we'll think about the fact we're thinking about things, and we analyze the fact that we're thinking a lot, and sort of analyze the thinking into obscurity. So you sit there and you've got all these thoughts coming in your mind, so you say thinking to yourself. And then you have all these itches in your body, and you sit there and you have the itchings to yourself. And this apparently can produce mindfulness. It's good for some sorts of people, possibly, but it's not good for people who have an anxious disposition. It can actually push them over the edge. So yes, vipassana has become almost like a trademark. I think it's no longer used in the sense that it originated within the Pali scriptures. Really, a complete technique needs to have elements of both. And you don't stop doing samatha at some stage and start doing vipassana. But the more calm your mind collects during your samatha practice, the more the vipassana kicks in to allow you to have more access to knowledge or inner vision that you didn't have before. Let's say your breathing meditation and this practice of Dhammakaya, which you've been doing, are both within the 40. And they both follow the same path. Where your break, where you suddenly do something new, which you call vipassana, would sort of make some sense, is these methods where your beginning method doesn't take you all the way to the absorptions. And somehow you need to switch to something else, switch horses halfway. Yeah, they're coming. For the mindfulness of breathing, it's in the recollections, I think. No, it's in the miscellaneous ones. Yes, we're nearly there. But let's have our graveyard meditations first. As I said, there's a graveyard here. If anyone insists on doing some graveyard meditation. So you get to meditate on corpses in various stages of decomposition. Oh, I see some interest. And maybe you can sort of consider what sort of people might benefit from that. But there are 10 stages of decomposition of a corpse. You can have the bloated corpse. This is the one I censored for you. Normally I have pictures as well, but I thought I might shock you or get some sort of legal process initiated against me. You never know. America seems to be full of it anyway. A corpse with a bluish color, discoloration. And you have a festering, and this is really good after lunch, yeah. A cut-up corpse. We have a chewed-up corpse, a mangled corpse, a mutilated corpse, a blood-stained corpse, a worm-infested corpse, and then finally, once the worms have finished their work, you get a skeleton. And yes, you go and you sit in the graveyard. Apparently what you do, if you really insist on practicing this, you go in an Indian-style graveyard where they don't spend too much time actually digging graves. They just sort of put them in the forest and leave them there with wrapped in as much rags as they can afford, which is sometimes none. And you sit there and maybe you take the corpse into your imagination and you imagine it at your center. Make it even crystalline inside. That's apparently how it's done in the proper sense of it. And along the way, you may have many other thoughts coming into your mind, like, just as they are now, so I will be. And like, what's the difference between me and them anyway? It's, it's just a question of life force, And you may let go of a lot of things which before you were quite attached to. Apparently it's really good for young monks. Oh yeah, it's part of the process. Yeah, it's sort of, stimulate all your senses at once. Yes. Sorry? Well, I'm not of this disposition, you see. And as we shall see, this is for people of a certain disposition. And if you get the person the wrong disposition doing it, it may have quite an adverse effect. Yeah. I'll tell you a story about this. Medical student story. Yeah, probably sound familiar. It's a Thai medical student story. It probably happens all over the world. These sort of medical students are having a laugh, and they thought they would play a prank on their friend, like you do, So one day when they were in the autopsy room, they stole someone's arm. And they brought it back to their dormitory with them, and they put it in their friend's bed with just the fingers showing above the covers. So when their friend came home completely unprepared and pulled back the covers, who's this person who's hiding under my bed covers? And there was no person, it's just a person's arm. They went into a state of shock and were admitted to a mental hospital. And they never recovered again. So that obviously wasn't a good meditation experience for that particular sort of person. Yeah. So what we learn from Asupa practice, Asupa means loathsome basically, is that it can get you a short way, which is from beginning meditation up to the first absorption, and it is for the R's, which means ragacharit, those who are attached to sense desire. So young monks having problem with the beautiful ladies, then they can go and look at some dead beautiful ladies, and generally they will sort of transcend that. And it's the same for all of them. Yeah.
So because I know that in the Zen school and then in some parts of Thailand and Burma, for their style of the skeleton meditation, they have a picture and then they imagine the skeleton themselves. But with Dhammakaya, would you imagine a skeleton at your center as opposed to imagining your bones?
Yeah, I think so. In the end, it has to bring you to the center. Why? Because that's where the absorption is going to happen. Yes?
People had debt, didn't have enough money to pay for. So what I heard is they went through this whole grieving process because they prepared the dead and they prayed and all this stuff. But I'm wondering if maybe that was kind of a form of meditation that helped them.
Well, we have made our society so clinical these days that we hide death away. And you might argue that we do that to this in a way that actually we lose contact with a part of our own existence. In the old days, they used to dress, clean the corpse and so on. It used to be something people would do as a community, and it's also a way of saying goodbye to that person too. So yeah, we have lost that. It's sort of become clinicized. So all we see is like this person who looks like they're going to wake up at any moment because they have such great makeup. So yes, it does restore something of the nature of realizing our own sense of impermanence as well. But it should be done. For most people, it should be practiced daily. And if you ever look at the chanting in the Thai temples, you notice that part of the evening chanting has the recollection, we are of a nature to die, we have not gone beyond dying. It's in there. It's something to pay attention to a little bit every day, not too much, not to the point we get put away somewhere, but just to have that awareness that life isn't forever, we're not immortal. Yeah.
Oh, so one last question. So with Dhamma, when you pass access concentration and true spirit mirrors and all that, right? Does that still have the same factors that describe in the commentaries about having a mind proceeding?
Yeah, we'll come to that. I've got a slide of it. Okay, so yes, you probably be doing this in my place before long. So, enough of that? You want more? They do have a graveyard, apparently. But it's a bit sort of cosmetically beautiful, unfortunately. Yeah. 10 recollections. So, recollection of the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the purity of one's precepts. So you think about, I take my 5 precepts, I've managed to maintain them, I've got that sense of integrity. You feel a sense of calm arising because of that. Generosity, a person who has made some sort of skillful donation, they feel a sense of joy arising from that. They can then take that to heart and meditate on it further. Recollection of angels, they usually explain there's the qualities of angels. Angels get to be angels in Buddhism because they are those of very high level of conscience. So thinking of that qualities of conscience can sometimes put you in the mood whereby a meditational state would arise. Recollection of death. So again, not too hardcore. You can probably imagine the sort of people who that would be helpful to. Recollection of the body. Sometimes it's more analytical in terms of basically recollecting, reducing the body to its parts and thinking about them as components in that way to let go of attachment to the body. Here we go, recollection of breathing. Recollection of the breath. And recollection of nirvana or the qualities of nirvana. So very high, pure states of mind. Yeah. Obviously a different clientele. You measure it up to the scale and we find recollections good, doesn't get you too far, good for people with lots of faith. Yeah? Same for the Triple Gem, precepts, generosity, angels. Yeah. Come to death, it's probably a different clientele. Yes, you're right, good for the Buddha sorts. Just thinking of death, wham, they know. Got to renounce the world and become a Buddha. Collection of the body gets you a little bit further for those who have a disposition towards sense desire, that's the body again, to disentangle yourself from attachment to the body or its beauties. Mindfulness of breathing, M, V's and B's. M being the ignorant ones, V's being the thinking ones, B's being the Buddha type, get the point quickly ones. There is a school of thinking which says that yes, this is good in the Western world especially, because Westerners tend to be rather like big on thinking, delusion and getting the point quickly. There you go. The good news is that it gets you to the higher absorptions from the word go. But yeah, you need to study the details because there are many ways to practice mindfulness of breathing. Like following the breath or focusing at a point on the breath, or which breath are you actually talking about? Is it the subtle breath or the physical breath, etc.? You know, there's detail. Recollection of nirvana, everyone, but it only gets you that far. Yeah? Last set, miscellaneous. We have meditation on loving kindness. You can probably guess who that's good for. Huh? Angry people, of course. Compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. This group of four are known as divine abidings. They're all related to one another, different sort of levels of empathy and love. Meditation on the loathsomeness of food. That's what the monks do, is the chanting after they've given the blessing, before they eat the food, is to recollect that the food is not for the beautification of the body or whatever, but it in itself it's of no beauty, it's just to keep your strength up. 4 elements within the body. So, going back to the old elements, come on, disco fans. Earth, wind, and fire. Oh, so okay, earth, wind, fire, and water. Yeah, within the body. So, your bones are the sort of earth element. Your blood is the water element. The warmth in the body is the fire element. Yeah, you can guess what the air is. By dividing your body up in that way, then you get a meditation, which again leads to non-attachment. Infinity of space, infinity of consciousness, meditation on nothingness, and meditation on perception or non-perception. Those last 4 are known as the formless Brahma states. So quite high-level meditations. Who are they good for? What? Where do they get you? Well, it's a high-level meditation, you can see. If you don't have anything to spread for your loving kindness, then you're going to have some problems doing it. But it is good for angry people, and it's good to pick up on once your mind has settled to a certain level. Same for compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Now, loathsomeness of food, you can guess different clientele, buddhicharits, and gets you as far as the first absorption. There's a story of a princess in the Buddhist scriptures. And princesses generally, like the princess and the pea, etc., don't get exposed to too much things that are loathsome. This particular princess had the misfortune to have to go and use a restroom that was rather primitive. And on entering upon this restroom, the products of the restroom were clearly on site and had worms eating them. And if it was a present day, the princess would probably say, "Oh my God." But this princess went into a state of shock and immediately attained the first absorption. Was shocked into first absorption by this experience of loathsomeness of food, in effect, because food looks a certain way when it goes in and looks a certain way when it comes out. And this was the latter of the two, and got her as far as the first absorption. But at that point, she would need to switch then to take her meditation further. 4 elements in the body, more of the same. The last ones are good for everyone, but they are advanced meditations. Yeah. So there you have your 40. Coming to Ryan's point about equivalence and how you would know you are in different states of absorption, then the traditional way in the scriptures is that you notice what's known as the jhana factors, which accompany entry upon each of these meditation states. And I'm sorry for the Pali, but it will make sure we're on the same page if you want to go and look it up anywhere else. First absorption has 5 factors, as Ryan pointed out: Vitaka, Vichara, Piti, Sukha, and Upekkha. Vitaka and Vichara, to explain those, Vitaka means place in the mind, sort of analytically. And then looking into the nature of what you are resting your mind upon. Piti is joy, sukha is happiness, upekkha is equanimity. So you get all those five, you notice you have all five, then wow, you must be in the first absorption. As you move further up the scale, you find that the factors don't increase, they actually disappear. So the placing and looking into that state are somehow disappear, and what you're left is with joy, happiness, and equanimity. If you go through the third absorption, joy disappears, and you're left with the happiness and the equanimity. Fourth absorption, even the happiness disappears. You're left with upekkha, equanimity, and one new one, which is one-pointedness of mind, ekaggata. And beyond that, well, if you look in the scriptures, you don't get a clear answer. So it's sort of possible to know where you are using these scriptural guidelines, but I don't think anyone would pretend that it's an easy task to identify without a doubt where you got to in your meditation. Sometimes meditation teachers can help you in this respect, but I would think that they would find it less easy than the person experiencing it. So we come to really how in the Dhammakaya tradition this same journey through the absorptions would be described. And it will be described not in terms of the states, but in terms of what you might see along the way. So, what you get to see in your meditation, even before you close your eyes, is the first of your meditational bodies, which is your physical body. It's quite clear to see for even non-meditators. Yeah? So you have certainly attained that one already by being born at all. Yeah? But what you may not know is there's another 17 bodies inside that, which you come into contact with as you progress through those absorptions. Rather like the skin on an onion, you peel off one layer and you get down to the next layer down, which maybe looks a slightly purer, more translucent color. Or sometimes you might compare it to those Russian dolls, where you take off the Papa doll and you get the Mama doll underneath. You take off the Mama doll, you get the baby doll underneath. Yeah, seen those Russian dolls? Yeah, so think about it like that. Within the human body, as our mind progresses inwards, we come to what's known as the refined human body, which looks pretty much the same as the physical body, only it seems to be frozen in time at about the age of 16. Male for the males, female for the females. Otherwise known as the astral body, dream body, subtle body, sort of thing which you would use when you are having your dream to go out and do cool stuff. If you're able to meditate further, and how you get to this would be generally, classically, as your mind focuses at the center, your mind has a sense of being absorbed to that, and you are able to go through the center, and in your awareness there will be something like a sphere of light arising at that place. After enlarging that sphere, then another one will come. And the same happens for 6 spheres, until eventually the 7th one, it's not a sphere anymore, it's an inner body, this one. That's how you do it in meditation. If you want to take a shortcut, you can take up astral projection.
Yeah, but my question about that is, when I practice meditation, should I even go to this?
You can try. I'll tell you.
So normally in meditation, you're visualizing the sphere, but I don't have to jump factors, for example, or maybe one
people attain these things, but they have different levels of sort of self-awareness as to where they got to. You know, just as a person can take a car journey and they may fall asleep the moment the car sets off and wake up at their destination, and they couldn't tell anyone how they got there. With meditation, it could be rather similar. People can whisk through these inner experiences. They've been there. They couldn't for the life of them tell you how they got there. And sometimes it's so fleeting, the experiences, that they didn't have the time to really notice what was happening during that time. So that could be the case for you. Given time and given more mastery, you could slow it down somehow and look to see, you know, if someone were to ask you, what does, you know, this joy actually feel like, you could actually get a good answer to that question. But it comes with mastery. I'm not being loud enough. Sorry about that. So, first layer. The next layer in is what's known as the angelic body. And with each of the levels, there are...
Sorry, quick question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. They gave me the mic.
Yeah, you got a better one than me.
So, is Brian talking kind of like lucid dreaming? Or is that...
Lucid dreaming would be a case of getting into your that body, the one before, but not in a way where you have too much control over it, because you haven't got into it sort of consciously. You sort of had to fall asleep to get into it, but it's the same equipment. Yeah, and trouble is, when you dream, then your dream body goes outside of where you are. The physical body is still lying there, and your dream body goes off and does some... There's a separation between the two, which wouldn't be encouraged in meditation. There's a danger there. Yeah. Okay. Angelic, they come in pairs, a coarse and refined. Generally, the coarse means the access, entry level, you might call it. Whereas as you progress within that same level of refined mind, you get to the sort of the flagship range, where, you know, that state has, you've reached a complete degree of mastery for that level of mind. Yeah, so coarse and refined for each of these pairs. How do we get these pictures? Well, in the main temple in Thailand, there are monks who are not only expert meditators, but who are also gifted in fine arts. So they've drawn it from first-hand experience. The angelic body is female for female, male for male. What you can see is the sort of what's known as ornamentation, which is a sign from the angelic level. Armband things, etc. From there, one transcends the male and female distinction, and at this sort of godlike level, and there are two levels of this: form Brahma and formless Brahma. So godlike levels, just now was like angel-like levels. Same for males and females alike. Coarse, refined. One step further, formless, Brahma body, refined. Beyond that, we come to what you would recognize as being like a Buddha statue, a body of enlightenment. Are they similar? Actually, similarities. So it's an attainment rather than a historical personage, a Buddha body, otherwise known as a Dhamma kaya. Yeah, so hence the whole name of this temple is sort of based on this meditation experience. And there's not just one level, I should add, there are 10 levels, which are known otherwise as the paths and fruits of nirvana. Heard of them before? Right. Apart from Ryan? Stream entry, once returner, non-returner, arahant. You look like you haven't heard of them. Well, that's for your homework. Yes.
I heard a recent lecture about the destiny of humans really are to become the perfect blend of both masculine and feminine, the marriage of the two energies of God and become one. And I always notice that a lot of the Buddhist statues and stuff, they really do look androgynous. So I'm wondering if this last attainment is bad, that you become the perfect blend of a masculine and feminine marriage of the whole person, God force, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I guess you could put it that way. My understanding is this whole gender distinction thing is all very interesting and nice, but within the meditational sort of progression, there's a point at which it's somehow transcended, and it's the sort of beings or states of being that one is talking about are those who are very high-minded, who have somehow transcended sort of base nature or instincts, to sort of put, without putting too fine a point on it, because the interests and the motivations and the desires of such beings or states of being have somehow transcended gender sort of attachments. So none of these things would really relate to physical states because they're all qualities of mind. Yeah, I don't think you get sort of beings with a physical body that is neither male nor female, because physicality tends to be restricted to that gender based society. Yeah. Okay. So how does this relate to, big picture. Let's have all the 18. Well, a sample of them anyway. We start down here with the physical body. Come on. Yeah. Move on to refined human body. Angelic bodies, where you see male and female distinctions. Beyond that level, all those are on the sensual plane, surprise, surprise. If you transcend the sensual plane, you get to what's known as the form plane. Gender distinctions are transcended. You've got the form Brahma bodies. Transcending that, you get to the formless ray. It doesn't mean it has no form, but the form is more subtle. Again, transcended. And of course, once you get to the level of bodies of enlightenment, which is somehow beyond that formless plane, this is where you really have crossed the boundary between samatha and vipassana according to the Dhammakaya way of looking at things. Because not only does the attainment have a body, but it also has all the senses and knowledge of pertaining to that body. So when you look at something with the eyes of, let's say, an angel or the eyes of a Buddha, you see things according to a reality which is much more accurate than you could see according to your physical body. Not going too far out on a limb. But that is where this special seeing of vipassana would actually occur in a way that's not imaginary anymore, but it's actually happening because you have a different platform upon which you are actually getting knowledge about the world. So it's not a different sort of meditation at all, but it is a stage or an aspect of the meditation which you could call that special seeing vipassana. Yeah? Oh, managed to take up a whole hour of your time so far. Pretty good going.
Can I
Yes.
ask a question? So, in the, I guess it's Chan Buddhism, when they refer to Buddha nature or Buddha mind, is that the Dhammakaya?
If you study Mahayana Buddhism, you can get a lot of quite confusing references to Dhammakaya, because they got this system of 3 bodies, Trikaya, Sambuddhakaya, Nivarnakaya, Dhammakaya. And you think, oh goody, they've got Dhammakaya too. And you go and see what they mean by it, and it means something like some formless, unknowable thing which includes the whole universe. And you think, well, that wasn't very helpful after all. So yes, they have it, but what they mean by it may be rather different. And I think what people have concluded is that Dhammakaya is not mentioned very much in Theravada Buddhism, but at least it's fairly clear what they mean by it. It's mentioned a lot in Mahayana Buddhism, but it's everywhere. Every page of the scriptures are more Dhammakayas, and yet it's not clear what they mean by it. So, yes, they are often interested to hear what Dhammakaya tradition in the Theravada has to say, because it throws some light on that. So it's in both, yes.